Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here with my friend Stuart Lackey. We're going to talk Kentucky sports today. We'll hit on the bowl game. We're recording this on Thursday. The game will be played Friday, so we're not even 24 hours out. So we'll hit that, but we'll hit it quickly because by the time you guys see this, it may be done. We'll hit the football transfer portal and talk hoops, which is always a popular topic in the state of Kentucky. Stuart, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me back, Chris. Hopefully you had a great Christmas and holiday season. Yeah, it's exciting time, basketball season. Conference play is getting ready to start, but we've got a little football tomorrow, so that's good too.
Well, we'll start there momentarily. Just a reminder, this video brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. All the major sports are in action this week with the college football playoffs also ready to kick off. Bet Online is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. Head to the website today to get in the action. See all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, well, games start noon Central for Kentucky in terms of bowl game playing Clemson. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on it because by the time people see this, it may be over. Clemson's down some guys for the bowl game, some key defenders. Kentucky seems to be in better shape there. How do you handicap this one? Because I wouldn't have felt great about it if you'd said Kentucky and Clemson are playing a bowl a month ago. But since then, Kentucky's beaten Louisville. Clemson's had opt-outs, and I think Kentucky has to feel better about its chances based on the way it finished the season, Stuart.
I think so, and I think that you nailed it at Clemson. You know, by their standards, certainly a disappointing season. You factor in the opt-outs and then factor in the opt-ins, Chris, for Kentucky. Devin Leary, again, up and down season, but your starting quarterback's playing. Your starting running back, who is essentially leaving for the NFL draft, and Ray Davis is opted to play. J.J. Weaver, Kentucky, many people in Kentucky thought he would be one of the top players on defense and still has that ability. Announced he's returning for a sixth season in college and playing in the bowl game as well. So I think minus a couple of season-ending injuries and surgeries on offense, Kentucky's got basically their full team, minus maybe some transfers entering the portal that are going to play. So that's really exciting and encouraging. And I think it's a lot of reasons why you've seen maybe the line on the game fall from 7 points. I think it's down to 4.5 points, at least last time I checked. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm taking Kentucky just because of the want to be there factor. We saw that come into play on Wednesday night when Texas A&M fell to Oklahoma State, a very depleted Texas A&M team. And I think A&M was a favorite of that one by not a lot, and a better team. But this is the day and age of opt-outs and mass transfers and all that, which I think is, in my opinion, really helped ruin the bowl season. But, Kentucky in better shape than most teams. And where Kentucky's really in good shape is the transfer portal, Stuart, because the Cats have added a couple of key guys from their SEC rival, Georgia.
Yeah, Brock Vandergriff, I think everyone is, ostensibly have said that maybe this is the highest rated player at quarterback since Tim Couch to suit up for Kentucky, a five-star kid out of high school, lost the job last spring and was a close race by all measures. And I think, the thing that he lacks, according to the experts, is a game experience. And certainly what we saw with Will Levis at Kentucky a couple of years ago, similar build, similar mold, but maybe even a better passer in terms of mechanics and skill, and hopefully will be a quick study under Liam Cohen, and we'll see him progress pretty quickly next year. And then Dumas Johnson, the linebacker, a Butkus Award finalist, a two-time national champion, also announced that he's transferring to Kentucky and will be a nice fill-in, especially with some of the departures on defense. Trevin Wallace, most notably at linebacker. So super excited about those two guys. A couple of wide receivers also coming into the portal. We won't see them in action until next fall. But, I think the wide receiver room and quarterback were certainly two of the biggest needs that Kentucky needed to shore up in this offseason, and they've started to do that.
All right, let's talk hoops for a few minutes because it's Kentucky. We have to do that. You have to be loving the way the team has looked since the Wilmington loss, beat a solid Penn program.
Right.
Beat North Carolina a couple Saturdays ago, and then although Louisville is not any good, being Louisville is always good for the soul of Kentucky fans. So
For
what
sure.
have we learned from the last 3 games? Because it's been a minute since you and I did this due to holidays and all those things.
Sure. Yeah, I think Kentucky mentioned the UNC Wilmington loss. I think maybe Kentucky's one of the only blue blood programs that has lost to a directional school in a state and then beat the main school, if you will, UNC Wilmington. Then a week later beat UNC on a neutral court. But at any rate, I think the fan base is, to be a top 10 ranked program after losing to Wilmington. And again, I think more people thought that Miami might be a more impressive win at this point. But certainly, it's always great to beat Louisville, and certainly our out-of-conference rival North Carolina to sit the Cats, I guess, ranked 9th, and maybe one of the darlings of the SEC and one of the favorites right now to come in and play well and have a chance to win the regular season title, maybe alongside with Tennessee. So I think a few surprises, honestly, Chris. The team started without the 7-footers. There are 3 that are technically on the roster. They now have 2 of those guys back. Aaron Bradshaw, McDonald's All-American, Oyenzo, a sophomore returning from last year's team. And then obviously the core of, wings that the Cats have that came in as freshmen. Everyone thought DJ Wagner and Edwards and Bradshaw were going to be, your lottery picks going, into next year's draft. And what's been the surprise, maybe, to many people in the college basketball world, as the emergence of both Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham, not just in wow factor moments, but to be present or have a significant presence off the bench as the 6th and 7th players off the bench to come in and have meaningful impact in every game this season. And some of the statistical results in that, in terms of leading key statistical categories in the league already, with a number of Kentucky players, most notably Sheppard. So tremendous surprise.
The Sheppard Dillingham debate is where I was going to go next, because a lot of people think Sheppard's been the best player in the league. I think Evan Maya's player ratings have got him the best player in the league. I'd have to check Ken Pomeroy. Maybe I'll do that as while we're doing this. I forgot to do that. And look, those are just mathematical formulas, and so I don't, how much stock can you put into those? I don't know. I mean, you look at all Sheppard's numbers. We've talked about those all year. Just how complete a player he's been, how efficient he's been, how good he's been on the defensive end. But I was listening to, I think it was Jeff Goodman. Well, I don't think it was Goodman, but it was a field of 68 guys. They were picking, I think, freshman of the year a couple of days ago, and they were talking SEC. And I think, Sheppard, of course, got a mention, but I think somebody picked Dillingham as the guy there, which kind of interesting. And I don't remember if it was more of a to now or speculative going forward pick. It felt like it was maybe more the latter, but it's a fascinating discussion to be had, because you've heard both sides of it nationally.
Well, we'll see what happens when you get into league play with athletic competition night in and night out. Sheppard hasn't, certainly there's some blue bloods on Kentucky's schedule, but he'll be tested, night in, night out as they get into league play. But if you just look at the statistics, he and Dillingham are tied for 3rd in assists in the league. He leads the league in steals. He leads the league in 3-point percentage. He is the complete player. And again, for a true freshman to come in and have that impact and be thought that many thought would be maybe the 5th or 6th player to have an impact of this incoming class is truly remarkable. And the thing I think that most Kentucky fans are the most excited about is the fact that when he does come into the ball game, he does have a very high plus minus. It's the highest on the team, and he elevates the play of everyone on the court. And it's palpable. It's immediate. And then, he's obviously loves to share the basketball, so he really doesn't care who gets credit. Dillingham, on the other hand, is electrifying. I don't know if you saw maybe the closing minute of the U of L game. Dillingham had a one-handed, windmill in garbage time that was kind of an afterthought. And at 6'1", his ability to elevate, I think people have been surprised at the percentage that he has shot the ball with has been extraordinary. So again, two people that maybe Kentucky thought they might get some contribution from, but certainly not to this level.
Yeah, and I thinking back on it, it had to be more of a maybe going forward because you look at the stats, you can't justify taking Dillingham as a better player over Sheppard. But I mean, hey, great argument to be having, right? And again, with all those other things that you mentioned,
Yeah,
you look at the stat sheet, they've got so many guys that can just put the ball in the
shoot.
hole.
Yeah,
It feels like we haven't talked about Antonio Reeves a lot, that he leads them in scoring. I mean, there's five guys averaging an 11 and a half points or more for this
a game.
team.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of teams in the country, maybe nobody, where that's the case.
Well, they've got those five guys averaging double figures, but at any given nights, there's seven players that can score double figures. It really depends on kind of who has the hot hand and who's getting those minutes. But yeah, you mentioned Antonio Reeves; he's second in the league in 3-point shots made, and again, to have, I think Kentucky's got four players in the top 20 of the SEC, at least at this point in the season, that are in terms of percentage, 3-point percentage. So Cal has never had this many players that have shot the ball at this level, certainly at this point in the season. Again, will all this carry through, into SEC play? I think, Kentucky, again, the return of these two big men, and we can maybe talk about that next, is really, I think a lot of Kentucky fans and analysts thought, well, how will the return of these two impact what Kentucky, had going certainly early in the season? And I think not only has the test, at least shown at this point that they've passed it, but Bradshaw certainly has the ability to step out on the perimeter and hit open shots. And man, when you're 7-footer, at least one of them can do that. It creates driving lanes and so many more opportunities inside on offense. And then now they've got him as rim protectors. So maybe the one weakness that Kentucky has, Chris, is on the defensive end. You now have a couple of rim protectors that can, help maybe, shore up that a little bit.
Expand on that a little bit. Obviously, the rim protection element is going to speaks for itself and how it'll change. But who do you think loses out on time? Because when somebody's getting minutes, they've got to come from somewhere. And what else does that change, you think, when they get everybody back and
Yeah,
full go?
I would love to say that there's one, hey, it's Wagner, it's Edwards that is maybe the liability on defense, but they're all, I think, kind of equally in the same spot in terms of ball line defense, in terms of picking, one-on-one man up and basically keeping them from driving straight to the basket. I mean, it's pretty brutal. And so if you've seen a lot of the scores this year, it's indicative. All these ball games have been pretty high scoring for the most part. And Kentucky's, fortunately, they're averaging in the 80s and they've scored in the 90s several times. They're going to have to score a lot of points. I don't see that changing much. I don't see the defense changing that much, although the number of blocks per game since the two 7-footers have entered the equation certainly have gone up. And again, that's their saving grace. Maybe they can afford to take even more calculated risks on steals and so forth, getting in passing lanes, knowing that they've got the one or two guys behind them. Trey Mitchell has played the 5 up to this point, and now he's had the ability to step out and play his natural position at the 4 and not stay down so low. So I think net it's going to be a positive for the Cats. And then again, I mean, you look at Cal's teams, Chris, historically, the ones that have had really good defensive statistics, they've just had a lot of length down low, to be able to help, weak side on to block shots and to clean up on the board. So hopefully that'll continue into league play.
They've got, what is it, 8 guys right now that are averaging 21 minutes or more. And that's a little deceptive because Bradshaw's only played 4 games and averaged 21 minutes. And
right.
But this could be, it feels like it's a team. Well, it's a weird spot because I feel like this is a more talented team than they've had in a couple years. And it's also a deeper team. So that to me just makes it more interesting.
Yeah, they've got 8 guys with Oyenzo. They've got 8 guys that can play meaningful minutes. And then, Visic, the Croatian, that people have kind of maybe forgotten about, certainly would be a part of this in some way. Remains to be seen on kind of what's going to happen with his eligibility. But yeah, they've got 8 guys right now that can come in and log meaningful minutes. And so what that looks like, Jordan Burks is the transfer, the young kid rather, the freshman, who's probably lost out at this point, but he played meaningful minutes early in the season until, the big guys returned. So he's obviously losing out on minutes now. But yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches. And I think the balance is what really teams are going to struggle with. There's really no one person that they can stop, really no two people they can stop, and not have the other three on the court at that same time do significant damage scoring the basketball. So again, I think it's Cal's best team, Chris, certainly since 2015, and maybe a better team, even a better team than that Fox Monk team from 2018. So Cal's just has not had this kind of balance in a long time.
Yeah, you just kind of took the words out of my mouth. I think that the completeness is there. You talked about the rim protection. We've identified guys who can defend. We've certainly identified guys who can score in the depth and everything. I just think it's going to be a fun season. I'll tell you what, when we do our power rankings every week at Southeastern 14, it's been a headache because it's hard to sort these teams out. I don't think there's a dominant team in the SEC right now. You thought Tennessee had the potential maybe to do that. Maybe even Arkansas, but Arkansas has been a horrible disappointment. Tennessee's been, I'd say, good, but not great. Maybe not compared to what people thought it could be. Kentucky's just kind of a work in progress for all the reasons we have rewound. And to me, right now, setting on the best team is either a Tennessee or Kentucky discussion. But I keep a kind of a composite power rankings. I take a few computers I like and just do a points above average thing. Kentucky is 17th in the country in the composite rating I picked up, but it's so close that if you give them another point and a half a game, they're in the top 10. So it's just going to be a hyper competitive atmosphere nationally. And then the SEC and the teams you got in front of Kentucky by the computers, you got Alabama at 5, Tennessee at 7, Auburn at 8, even though Auburn hasn't beaten anybody. And then behind Kentucky, a couple points, you got A&M, Mississippi State, Florida, and then whatever Arkansas ends up being. They're further down the list. Not to mention Ole Miss and South Carolina, which are not computer darlings, but having nice seasons. Yeah, Ole Miss has a little bit. Ole Miss at least beat Memphis at home. So there's that. But I just think it is going to be a fascinating league. I don't think you're going to see a team run through this league like a buzzsaw, like Kentucky used to do, like you've seen Nate Oates do at Alabama a couple of times. Even Auburn did it, a couple of years ago. I just think the league night in and night out is going to be fun.
Yeah, it should be. You mentioned Tennessee. I think maybe the most impressive 3-loss team in the country. I mean, you lose to Marquette, Purdue, North Carolina, at the Maui Classic, right? 3 successive days. And so I would say, again, in some of their wins, maybe they haven't won as convincingly as people would like, but I think they're certainly right up there. And then again, we haven't really seen, I think you said Kentucky is a work in progress. I think you still have to look out for Alabama, even though they've had a really disappointing start by preseason measure. So, but you're right. We'll see what Ole Miss really is. We'll see what South Carolina really is. And, who kind of fills in that middle tier of the SEC. But yeah, it should be an awesome season. As a Kentucky fan, you always believe that your team has a chance to win the league. But I think this year they've actually proven it for the most part in the non-conference to actually come in. I mean, they've got Chris, this team, and this team, Cal has always recruited really good athletes that have been really good basketball players. This team, they're all really high IQ, very few mistakes. I mean, look at their turnovers in most of their games. I mean, minimal turnovers, especially with the way they share the ball. They're really good basketball players that also happen to be phenomenal athletes, most of them. And by the way, we haven't even talked about the Adu Thiero. He's the other 6'8" guy that's just, causing havoc when he does get time on the floor. Cal coached his father at Memphis. That kid's going to be an NBA player, and nobody's talking about it. And so, again, that just came to mind. So sorry for the tangent there, but
no. Well, I mean, here's another little tangent. It feels like, and you're closer to it than I am, the mood around this team, the fan mood is pretty positive. I mean, it's been, by Kentucky standards, it's been a bleaker 4 or 5 years. There's been a lot of talk. Do they have the right coach? All those kind of things. It's been a minute since they've been to a Final Four, and used to be losing to a team like Kentucky's lost to, what was it, Wilmington? Yeah, I get my UNC schools mixed up. I have to check every now and then. But that was cause for 5-alarm fires. It feels like there's a little more sanity around it. And maybe that benefits Kentucky in the long run.
Well, you got to think about that game too. DJ Wagner was injured; he didn't play.
Yeah.
You didn't have your 7-footer, so it's kind of like this Florida State thing in football. It's like, you got to look at who the team is, presently, when you're evaluating them. And I think most Kentucky fans are like, wow, that's a really horrible loss. That's a bad team. It's the reason, honestly, Kentucky's probably not a top 3 team in the rankings right now. And it's going to hurt them at tournament time, depending on how they finish the SEC schedule. However, I think you're right. The fan base is more sensible. They see the progression, and they just see the all-out ability that when this team is playing together, they've got a lot of ways they can beat you. And I think Kentucky fans have always wanted this under Calipari. Really wanted all this. The history of the program is to be relevant nationally, right? Is to be relevant in the conversation, to have a shot to win it. And I think the fan base feels better about this team, like I said, maybe than in any time in the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you might pump the brakes isn't the right word. I guess the one thing, a caution going into this, is because look, if you said who is the best team in the league, if everybody puts it together, my conversation before the season probably would have been A&M based on experience.
Yeah.
Arkansas based on the talent it brought in the portal. Arkansas is not even a tournament team right now. So I think you've got to kind of put them to the side and allow for the possibility that Musselman will get them there, because he usually does. Right. Tennessee, for obvious reasons, I felt like the Connect signing really hit where they lacked. And then Kentucky was kind of the wild card, but it's like, well, okay, the talent's there and they put it together. And now that we've seen the talent, I think expectations are higher than I would have thought a month and a half ago. But the only thing I would say is the out-of-conference resume isn't maybe quite what you would have hoped. Because, the Wilmington loss will probably dock them a seed line. The Carolina win, I think, is going to hold up. And in terms of the Miami win, I mean, that's probably not a tournament team right now either. But you never know. Jim Larinaga gets his guys. That's only the one caution is, in what I think is going to be a dog-eat-dog league, you probably better win more than your share of close games if you want to get, say, a top 3 seed line come March. But look, I don't know that's ultimately going to matter. I could see this team getting a 5 and winning the whole thing anyway.
Yeah, that for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 10 teams right now in the league, I think, that have a 8 or more wins going into this weekend. And again, we know some of these schedules are cupcake central, right? A lot of these teams are playing really, really poor competition. So we'll see. I mean, I think, what was it preseason? A lot of the forecasting was 8 teams, maybe 9 teams to make the tournament. And there's a lot of work to do. So yeah, we'll see. Florida's another surprise. The Cats, by the way, open up in Gainesville next Saturday, to open up SEC play. And so the Gators are, again, they're 9-3. We'll see what they really have and who they are. But right now Kentucky is not favored to win that game. I think a couple of websites have them as slight underdogs in Gainesville. So, Kentucky opens with Florida, by the way, then Missouri, and then Texas A&M. So, that'll be interesting. We'll learn a lot more about the Cats after the first 3 league games.
Yeah, I think I would put the number of bids for the league at about 7.5. I think Tennessee's going to be there. Auburn's going to be there. Alabama's going to be there. Kentucky's going to be there. A&M's going to be there. I think Mississippi State will probably be there. That's 6. Florida, got a pretty good shot. Ole Miss, got a pretty good shot. The computer numbers aren't great. And then whatever you do with Arkansas, maybe the number's more like 8 than 7.5. But I think that's the list of teams, and I just think that's going to make for a super interesting regular season with a lot of scoreboard watching. For whoever your team isn't playing included in that too.
Yeah. I mean, you could talk about Alabama. I'm just going back and looking at their loss. I mean, they've lost to some. They lost to Arizona, Creighton, Purdue, lost to Clemson, and lost to Ohio State. So, I mean, their losses are not necessarily bad losses, right? So, yeah, we'll see. It's going to be. It's always interesting. I think, Tennessee, obviously, the local, the local folks here in Nashville believe that, Tennessee, with the bounty of talent they have, they will, I guess they are figured right now to be league favorites or favorites to win the league, right? Is that your understanding, or did
I don't know. I don't know that there is a favorite. I mean, I would argue, and I'd have to look at schedules. I mean, Tennessee, Kentucky, flip a coin. Maybe you differentiate between does one team get, Auburn and Alabama twice where somebody's getting Vandy and LSU. I haven't gone into it with that level of detail. I mean, you could argue, if you look at computers, you could argue Kentucky, you could argue Tennessee, you could argue Alabama, you could argue Auburn. You could certainly argue A&M based on history, and Arkansas based on talent. I mean, I need to see more from Arkansas before I go there.
Right.
But I mean, you looked at that team in preseason and you said that's a juggernaut they built out of the transfer portal.
They're massive. Yeah.
And they do this every year where they sort of sandbag at the first half of January and then they flip a switch and they don't lose for 2 months. So,
right. Yeah. Well, listen, you've got a lot of teams with 3 losses. If you have an SEC champion that has 3 or fewer losses, that's a 2 seed, most likely. And then if someone somehow can manage, maybe to lose 1 or 2 SEC games, like a Kentucky or Tennessee, they got a shot at being a 1 seed. So we'll see how the rest of the conferences play out. But, a 5-loss Kentucky team or a 5-loss Tennessee team at the end of the season, I think that's a compelling story.
Yeah, I really don't think seeding for Kentucky is going to matter. If they play up to their capability and they're there in mid-March, you could give them a 1, a 5, or 6, and I think they're good enough to take care of business.
Well, you need to be a 1, 2, or 3, because that 4-13 matchup is a UNC Wilmington waiting for you, and that's that's the kind of thing. If I look for a top 3 seed team in today's college basketball, you're probably right. I think beyond that, it can be a crapshoot. But probably the statistics tell that tale too. So.
Well, I mean, you say that UConn was a 4 year ago.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
So, look, if you're good enough, you figure it out, I think.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've seen teams in this tournament that darn near get beat in the first round by one of those teams and then run the table. So,
that's true.
I don't mean to totally dismiss your point, but.
Yeah. I just like, I'd rather the Cats, have a chance, 3 seed or higher, I think is in store, certainly for a number of teams. If they play the way they're capable of playing, I think you could have a couple of FCC teams that are, a 2 or 3 seed. And again, I mean, Kentucky could have a great run. Any of these teams could have a great run in the SEC and do something special, and who knows how it's going to play out. But man, it's all going to be here in 2 months. It's what's hard to believe. It's all going to go by in the next 9 weeks. And, we'll look up and we'll be halfway through college basketball season, conference schedule anyway. So
I just think it's going to be so much more fun. Some years we have this, about every third year, it's going to be, is so-and-so going to go unbeaten?
Yeah.
Can anybody beat them is the question. And I think this year it's going to be like, which of 5 or 6 teams is going to win this thing? And is anybody going to win the league with 4 losses or fewer? I think those are legitimate questions.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And again, there's so much to figure out, and then who's going to stay healthy, and that always comes into play. And but yeah, I'm excited for the season. The transition from football to basketball is always a great time in Kentucky. And now, if the Cats can just close out football season to finish, 8-5, it'd be a nice feather in the cap to beat a Clemson team tomorrow, and then actually the Cats have to take care of business on the hardwood tomorrow night against Illinois State. So one more non-conference game for the Cats, and then next Saturday it all starts.
Well, a belated Merry Christmas to you and your family, and an early Happy New Year. And boy, we will have a lot to discuss in 2024.
Appreciate you as always. Thank you, Chris.
All right. He's Stuart Lackey. I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14, and we'll see you again soon.